Ukraine, the U.S. and NATO allies are bracing for more potential attacks from Russia.
As we've reported, multiple cities were hit with missiles and airstrikes Thursday. As President Biden threatens more sanctions on Russia, he is holding back from sending any American troops into combat.
Now, for more, we want to bring in retired Brigadier General Peter Zwack. In addition to his 34 years in the Army and a career serving our country, he also served in Moscow for 2 years as the U.S. senior defense official and attache to the Russian Federation. Brigadier General Zwack, welcome. Thank you for joining us. A couple quick questions here. The paths we're seeing the Russians take into the Ukraine, when you see some of those paths, what do you believe their strategy is at this point?
Thank you, and great question. We were all, I think, looking at it from different approaches. One, do they take the small bite, meaning they consolidate, if you will, the breakaway regions that they declared independence? That was one. Do they go after the whole Donbass? Two, do they try to push down out of the Donbass down to and connect with Crimea? Three, four, do they have a scenario, the big scenario, where they come out of Belarus and the West and up from Crimea in the Black Sea and go for all of Ukraine east of the Dnieper River, which is the sort of like the Mississippi there. What is going on now, and I think that even those of us that have been looking at it, and I think we're still wrapping our heads around that they have gone at least in almost a shock and awe mode. I heard that term, and I believe that's not inaccurate, where in a number of Ukrainian cities, not up along the fronts, they've dropped cruise missiles or short-range ballistic missiles, and they have also come across the border. I was really, it was interesting to see earlier this morning, Russian paratroopers that had been airlanded and to seize a Ukrainian airfield just 20 miles from Kyiv. Now, which makes me wonder if they're doing all this, shock, intimidate the Ukrainians ideally into submission, get the Ukrainian government to flee or to roll, set the conditions to put a Russian puppet, if you will, regime in Kyiv, and they talk about, last thing, about no military in there. Well, if they could do it this way, then the Ukrainians are compliant, which is where I believe they're supremely making a miscalculation, because Ukrainians aren't going to be compliant even if Kyiv is taken, is now how are you going to not occupy Ukraine if you're trying to do a change of government? And you got to back it up. So it's a tough position. Last thing, you saw in Kazakhstan just a few months ago, the Russians actually go in and support a sympathetic Ukraine, Kazakh, and leave. And they did that in Belarus early on. But here is the deception, the misstating. When they say we're not going to leave, the Russian forces were supposed to leave after 20 February from Belarus, and they stay. And they have now become part of the northern offensive arm that most threatens Kyiv.
Brigadier General, you make a good point that, setting up some sort of puppet government aligned to Moscow seems like in line with what Putin has done before. But I want to ask you about what's happening right now, because as you know, President Biden says he will not send U.S. troops to fight Russia. But what about air cover or establishing a no-fly zone over Ukraine to give the Ukrainian military a fighting chance in a ground war? That's what so many, Ukrainians are asking the world to do. They say, look, we are ready and willing to defend our country in a ground war, but we cannot fight the Russians in the air. Are there military options available at this point that would involve protecting the airspace over Ukraine?
This is a horrific dilemma. There's no doubt. I believe that the administration and our allies are on the right approach. It's hard. It's hard to see a partner, a democracy, struggling democracy, but a democracy that the Russians have called out as a neo-fascist state. It's crazy. But no-fly zones and all that. That means we're trying to hermetically, with our air power, protect areas that the Russians may be going in with strike aircraft and all that. Then you get a combat over the air of Ukraine, and whether it's ground troops or air, it's combat. And then this thing could mutate and stress in really dangerous ways, not just regionally, but accidents and incidents and provocations in the world between our capabilities and theirs, Arctic, Atlantic, Mediterranean, Pacific. So I agree, it's hard. That basically now we have to play a long game, realizing that the Ukrainians are amazing duress. The Russians are going to get in there, but there's going to be a resistance, and it is going to be hard for the Russians. And you've got Russian soldiers and Ukrainians, Slav on Slav, killing each other. That doesn't play well in the Russian heartland either over time. So that's one. And then two, an anaconda worldwide effect of economy, sanctions, diplomatic isolation, political isolation, societal isolation, and you just make it so hard for the Russians to exist in this world in any type of. They are seen as a complete malign entity. Now, I say all this as one deep down who fundamentally likes the Russians. I have 33 years of my life in and out of there, a lot among the Russian people. But what the regime is driving them into, and the people are patriotic, but they're not blind. This is a tragedy that will probably bring down Russia as well in the long term. But the risk of bringing down everybody else is also frightening.
Thank you very much.